Onions. Most of you will tear up when I say that word. The reason is that you probably don't know how to effectively cut an onion. If you know how to cut an onion right, you shouldn't have to cry as much. Either that or you just get really used to it. We have three different types of onions here. We have a yellow onion, we have a red onion, and then we have our scallions or our green onions. These are usually the three types of onions that I like to use. Yellow onions are kind of the all-purpose onion. You can use them for pretty much everything because they're a nice mild flavor and it's usually what we're used to onions tasting like. White onions are generally a more mild version of the yellow onion, but personally I haven't been able to see much of a difference. Red onions will be a much milder version of the yellow onion. Now, a lot of times you'll see sweet onions in the grocery stores, and the sweet onions might look yellow, and they'll actually be a little bit more mild than our red onions. That's why a lot of times you see red onions put on salads raw and things like that, because they're a little bit more mild, and they also add a color or a garnish effect to that. Now, our green onions are a little bit different because you can see they're very different looking. The green onions will actually grow just the tiny little bulb and will use most of the stem here versus the onion that grows in the bulb, we use all bulb instead of the stem. Okay, so here we have our green onions. The easiest way to use the green onions is slicing them up. So I'll kind of just line them up here and take those tops off because those are kind of the wilted, garbage tops. We don't want those. So I'll take that off and I'll come back and I'll just kind of slice these up. Now these go well in a lot of very mild dishes or onion dishes that you want kind of like a garnish effect with. So what we'll do is we'll take our garnish onions here and we can kind of finish a sauce with them, or we can start from the beginning, either or. They just have a much milder flavor. Now, we usually will cut down all the way until we start to get into the white parts. So usually this part is where they will stop using the onions because you lose kind of that mild flavor, you get more into the yellow onion taste. With our regular onions here, we'll move these over, bring our yellow onions on here. Our yellow onion, what I'm going to do is I'm going to lose the top and the bottom, so take just those edges off there. And I'm going to show you a couple different ways to cut an onion. There's kind of the culinary world at large, the way they do it, and then there's the way that I like to do it. So what we'll do is we'll just kind of take some of that skin off. I like to make a little bit of an incision just kind of on the top there, and then just get underneath that first layer and just kind of peel off all that outside. So we peel off all that skin and all that stuff we don't want to use. At this point, I'll cut it in half, and then if I wanted slices or juliennes, then I could just simply, following the curve of the onion, cut into it so that I have those slices. Okay, once I get to that top point, instead of coming back this way, all I'll do is just scoot that forward, move that on its side there, and then do the same thing that I did before. That way it's a lot easier to cut. Okay, those would be our slices. Now, if we're doing dices, I'll actually do them the exact same way. Now, once again, this is my way of doing it. What I'll do is I'll make those incisions, but I'll kind of make sure that they stay in place this time. And then I'll follow the natural curve all the way around. And then, once they've all stayed together, then I'll just come back, turn it to the side, and actually cut through and do those actual dices. Okay? That's the easiest way that I've found to do it. Now, this is coming from a guy who used to have to do 50 pounds of onions at a time. So that's my way of doing it. Now, the red onion, what we'll do is we'll lose the top, lose most of the bottom. Now, I'm just going to take just the kind of that little dirty part off. And then, at this point, I'll cut it in half. Now, by cutting it in half, I can still get under that nice little layer there, that first layer. And I can kind of peel it back. Okay, so once we have that, Move all that off to the side. Now here, what we'll do is we'll actually go in kind of just at the side, and I'll cut in almost all the way through, but not quite all the way through. About that far in. Okay, and I'll do that all the way up the onion. Just cutting kind of in, but not all the way through. Now you want to make sure that you hold on to the top fairly firm, but not too firm, because if it's too firm, it won't work. And then we'll come back and we'll cut this way. And once again, we'll cut almost all the way through, but not quite all the way through. Now you'll notice at this point that we have an onion that looks like it hasn't even been cut. So we'll come back in here and then we'll slice it all the way through. So it stays all together because we didn't cut it all the way through, but then as soon as we cut it, it just all falls apart. So there's a few different ways of cutting onions. The biggest thing is no matter how you cut onions, the more you cut, the more it'll make you cry and the more they'll fall apart. But that's okay because, hey, you expect that, right?